Hello, welcome back to the NOTCAST. It's number 316. Today's the 11th of September 2023. We are in the midst of a heat wave. I think yesterday or Saturday was the hottest day of the year, which, given that it's in the middle of September, is pretty surprising, all things considered. So yes, I am wearing shorts, but I do have British knees, so hopefully you will never see them. Today, I'm going to be talking about David Bowie. Well, I'm going to be monologuing or mansplaining, depending on your point of view, about David Bowie's 28th studio album. It's 28, I think, if you include Tin Machine, released in September 2003. Reality. I'm also going to be talking about a DVD edition of the album, a bonus disc version of the album, a DVD single. What a terrible idea that was. A live album, a remix album that's dog shit, and a live DVD. So here we go. This is going to be the for at least 10 years. This was where the David Bowie story ended. Other bit of personal admin. It's been a week since I've done one of these. I have a very good reason why. I have been away for work, so I've been away from home for a few days, 3 days, and I also went to see a band. I went to see a band called Sleeper, featuring John Stewart on guitar. John plays guitar for the wedding present as well. So I've been pretty busy, all things considered. In fact, I'm going out tomorrow as well. Where do I get the energy from? The answer is I don't. So there we are. So yes, back to the matter in hand. The 28th studio record by Sir David Bowie, Reality, released on the 15th of September 2003. So this was the last album that David released during his, I think, more public life, before he at the very least switched from broadcast to transmit in 2004. And this was, by the way, the eighth Bowie LP in 10 years. We had Black Tie White Noise in 1993, Brother of Suburbia in December 1993, Outside in 95, Earthling in 97, Hours in 99, Toy, which didn't come out in the year 2001, Heathen in 2002, and then Reality in 2003. So I think it's fair to say at this point it was probably regarded as just another David Bowie LP. Now you could go, what do you mean just another David Bowie LP? Well, when you've had 8 in 10 years and you've toured the world 5 or 6 times in that period of time, it's very easy to think, oh, I'll miss the chance to go to see him because he'll be back next year. He's always going to be there. And I think perhaps a lot of people were kind of taking David a little bit for granted at this point. He'd been making records for so long, so frequently, he'd been out of the public eye for at most 2 or 3 years in that period. And even then, I think his quietest period between the ending of the Hours tour, the promo tour in 1999, and the Heathen shows in 2002, he had, after all, played Glastonbury as well. So it wasn't that he disappeared completely off the face of the earth. There was more that people had just got used to him always being there, always being around, always touring. And you don't give people a chance necessarily to miss you. And that is a strange place to be as an artist, is that you end up thinking, and this is a thing that happened with Van Halen in the David Lee Roth era, where, you know, they were playing, you know, Tulsa in Oklahoma 3 times in 6 months to ever dwindling audiences. And people are like, well, I saw them 3 months ago, I saw them 6 months ago, the show is exactly the same, there's no new material, can't really afford to go see them quite so often. And so you end up, even, this is a thing that's affected Metallica as well, actually. You look at their stadium shows, and sometimes the top deck is completely empty. And you kind of go, have you overdone it? Have you oversaturated the market? And the answer is sometimes, yes, it is, actually. You've overdone it. This album was, for a long period of time, that's where the David Bowie story ended. It was an album where David Bowie played the role of a international multimillionaire rock star called David Bowie, and he was playing a caricature of himself in much the same way as all his previous identities. So you think about that, for example, 1973, Ziggy Stardust, 1974, Plastic Soul, 76, The Thin White Duke, 78, The Sailor, etc. 1983, well, I think probably more The Sailor in 1983, but 1983 was, you know, the pastel suits. 1987 was the Glass Spider. He was playing another affected role, this time just one that involved slightly less dressing up than normal. And for Reality, as a concept. If you've got long memories, if you remember 2003, and I do, it was a strange and transitional period in world culture. So CDs ruled the universe, LPs and vinyl were dead. There was a transition between forms of digital communication and the move away from the old-fashioned meat space. So broadband had just become pretty popular. File sharing was starting to happen. Napster was starting to happen. Effectively, we were looking at the great digital migration of culture and communication away from what previously had been seen as the gatekeepers. So you didn't have to wait for the Wednesday to find out when you bought Sounds and Melody Maker and NME. You didn't have to wait to find out who was touring. You didn't have to wait to find out what was coming out. A band could send you an email. The tickets could go on sale half an hour later. You could be broke 45 minutes after that. That's how it works. And it was a transitional period for world culture. And so there was a lot of conversation around, well, what was reality? Was reality the perception that we have, the electronic or the electric impulses that fly through our brain? And how does the impulses that flow through our brain, when they get into your face, and when you look at those and you kind of go, well, is that what I'm seeing, just because it's reflected on a screen, presented on a screen and then presented to me, does that make it any less real than if it's an actual physical tangible object that you can hold and touch? And the answer is, well, probably not. It's all forms of reality. And there was this is covered actually in the cover of the LP there, because what you've got is you've got a false representation of who Bowie is. You've got a hyper-realised version of him, which is abstract. And then you've got the idea of going, well, we all shape our own reality. We shape our own self-image. We shape our own perception. So we make decisions around how we look and what we do and how we're perceived, right down to, the avatars that we have in the little right or left corner of the screen, on your Facebook and your Twitters and your TikToks and whatever the hell else, Instagram, your little profiles. Go, this is the representation of who I am. We make a decision to curate the version of ourselves that we present to other people. And reality was no more than Bowie really kind of writing that very, very large and going, this is the version of reality that I'm creating and curating and presenting to you. It wasn't intended, this album wasn't intended as a final statement, as if everything had come to an end. It was just one more statement, and things are starting to come to an end. There was a recognition that, at the age of 56, and this was recorded between January and May 2003, is kind of like aging and going, well, who am I now? What am I going to be? Where am I going to go? Who am I going to love? These type of things. These are all the ideas that trickle down through the whole of the Reality album, like water. It was about Bowie saying, this is who I am, and presenting himself as that. Now, I should point out, although I'm holding a vinyl LP, the vinyl version of Reality wasn't released until April 2014, which means when it was released, it was like a great number of other artists. It wasn't released on vinyl. It was only available as a CD, and if you're really lucky, in somewhere, a cassette. I don't even know if it was released on cassette, but for a long period of time, this was effectively the only version of Reality that you could have. And it wasn't a statement around, this is the end. It's more saying, this could be the end. This could be a version of the end that it could be. Carpe diem, seizing the day and recognising that every day could be the last. With Reality, I think the album as a whole is, the world had changed. I talked about digital migration earlier on, so CD singles were no longer a really popular currency. What we had instead, and this was, I think it's fair to say, suboptimal, the DVD single. There was a CD single, I think it was only released in Canada and Australia, but in the UK, you had a DVD single and didn't even have a 7-inch. And so for Reality, you just had this CD, and then later on, this CD. Now, both of these have a slightly different selection of bonus tracks. They've both got the album as such, the 11-track version. This is the one that was released on day one, that features 3 bonus tracks on the second CD, following on from the Heathen template, those songs being Fly, Queen of All the Tarts, and a re-recording of Rebel Rebel. And then later on, released in some parts of Europe We had Reality with a concert DVD, a 5.1 concert DVD recorded at the Hammersmith Riverside Studios on the 8th of September 2003, and the bonus track, the cover of the Kinks' Waterloo Sunset. Instead, what we had with this album was not a collection of, it wasn't a thematic release. There was no through line for it. There was no underlying concept behind the album. It was a collection of songs living in the moment that by default became his last statement. It was one of these things where culture itself, as I said, was going through a period of digital migration, and so even the release for CD was a way of imposing order upon chaos, because what you could have done is you could have released 12 individual songs all for download, and then let people assemble their own albums, their own running orders. So releasing this effectively is like picking out, well, these are my favourite 10 or 11 or 12 songs from this particular period. This is the order I like to listen to them in. And it was a period where there was actually very little tangibly to show for it, apart from 2 CD albums and a DVD single. So we open up side 1, track 1 of the LP. Not that I'll show the LP, because of course it wasn't released in 2003. It is the only physical single that was released from it in the UK. Well, sort of. New Killer Star. And it was available primarily as a DVD single. What a terrible concept the DVD single actually is, isn't it? Heavily kind of leaning into these colours of pink and blue, and even taken away from the cover art, removing the visual of David himself, just presenting this I think whatever it is, a guitar that's got a unique and unusual shape. It's a strange song because it's kind of got this lyric around having the world kind of slipping away from you. The idea of having that sense of reality which doesn't necessarily really exist. It's a list song, and there's lots of great list songs in the world. Roger Waters tends to write nothing but list songs, but whereas New Killer Star is a song that perhaps got a slightly different lyrical approach. Let's see if I can go into the lyric here. Oh God, I don't even know where I've stuck it now. Hang on. Right, so the lyrics to New Killer Star, handsily enough, not placed necessarily in the sequence that they are on the album inside the lyric booklet. And it's got a lyric which is, I think, really, it opens with the line, "See a great white scar over Battery Park, then a flare glides over, but I won't look at that star." Now, bearing in mind that we're talking about, it's on the 11th of September this year, and it's 22 years since the attacks on 9/11. Reality is probably the only Bowie album that was specifically, I think, written in the post 9/11 environment. The idea of a great scar kind of cutting across the whole of a city. There was a sense of wounds healing around that, but wounds leave a scar. And you can't necessarily pretend that isn't there. So in Japan, by the way, there's a concept, of thing called kintsugi, which is the gold in the glue that you put in towards when you repair something that draws attention to and highlights the fact that it has been broken and now is it repaired. And New Killer Star is kind of a song that works on some, I think, fairly interesting wordplay, because New Killer and Nuclear are very similar to each other. There's a rhyming of star and scar. There's a drawback to the earlier song Star by David himself. But there's also, it's a list of detail, it's a list of observations. It's a song about where you choose your own reality. You kind of form the version of reality that exists on the basis of the curated memories which you have. Now, I mentioned earlier on about how we curate our online identities. This song is kind of drawing attention to that as well. The idea of going, well, actually, you're going to curate your existence and decide what it is that you keep and what it is that you don't keep as you go forward into the future. There's a kind of like a reference almost to the mass grave that was the World Trade Center, which hung like a shadow over New York. Not that I've been to New York ever, actually, come to think of it. And if I'm speaking out of turn, I'm not trying to offend anybody here. This is just me as an outsider looking at New York as an abstract concept that exists, as opposed to anything perhaps more concrete than that. and how the existence of New York in the psyche of the world from a cultural perspective has been changed forever. There's the before, there's the after, and you can't go back to the before because the before no longer exists. Or as the cliche goes, the past is a country you can no longer visit. And in the lyric that we've got to Nuclear Star, it's around it really an element about choosing the reality that you choose to live in, taking from the circumstances that you can't control. You've got to remember what Philip K. Dick said about reality, which is reality is that which does not go away when you cease to believe in it. And that's what reality as an album is. It's going, that's what this is. This is a bunch of stuff that you can't negotiate with. You can only really form from it your own conclusions. The absolute facts of the matter still exist and are still there. And as a whole, I think the song kind of reflects on, say, for example, I got a better way, ready, set, go. And going, this is what I'm going to take forward into the future is perhaps a better way of living, a better reality than perhaps you could have had if you were perhaps not quite so lucky. So that is kind of the song Nuclear Star, which is not, it's good melodically, musically it's quite good, Nuclear Star, but it's not my favourite Bowie song by a long stretch of it. And as I said earlier, there was a perception of this album, certainly it's just another Bowie LP, isn't it? There'll be another one in 2 years if I don't like that, and he'll still tour, and I'll go and see him in 2005 or 2006, and he'll headline stadiums, and it'll be great, and it'll be like the Rolling Stones, but one bloke instead of 4 or 5. And as we know, reality has a habit of not necessarily turning out quite how you'd want it to be, because reality is something which refuses to go away when you cease to believe in it. So we have reality. Then track 2 is Pablo Picasso. I think Pablo Picasso is a cover version. David was certainly not averse to sticking cover versions on his albums, especially when he didn't necessarily have enough songs. You think about the extra tracks that exist around this period. There's actually very, very few extra tracks. If we go very quickly to the what I call the silver box edition of Reality from the 2005 kind of 10 CD expanded versions, you look at the songs that are on this version of the album. What have we got? Well, we've got Waterloo Sunset, Fly, Queen of All Tarts, the re-recording of Rebel Rebel, Love Missile F111, and then a whole bunch of remixes. So that's at most 2 other Bowie originals which weren't on the album. Not that many, all things considered. There was very little extra material to take over. And in fact, it being the 8th LP in 10 years, Bowie was moving at great pace and great speed now when he was doing this. So Bring Me the Disco King, track 11 on the album, is a remix and re-recording of something that was originally kind of worked up during the Black Tie White Noise era. So it's been fairly prolific, and the guy's starting to run out of songs. But we do have track 3 is Never Grow Old. And Never Grow Old is a wonderful inversion of both The Who's Hope I Get Old Before I Die and or more correctly, Hope I Die Before I Get Old, and Robbie Williams' Old Before I Die, which had come out only a couple of years previously. So Never Get Old is almost definitely a kind of sly kind of piss take of that. And as you can also see, Never Get Old kind of also ties into the cliche that comes from the film Lost Boys, which is you never get old. And one can argue that Bowie barely aged throughout the course of his life. Certainly, when you think about photo fits of, or like someone at, let's say 56 when this came out, someone at the age of 56 was arrested, and you look at the mugshot of them, and you kind of go, oh, you look every one of your years. He definitely looked younger than 56. I think it's fair to say, but obviously he was not immortal, as we've later found out. Never Get Old, I think, is a really interesting song. It's a song that really it kind of opens up with a bunch of platitudes. So the opening lyric is, better take care, I think I better go, take care of me, I think about this, and I think about personal history. And you kind of go, right, so that's a lyric where you're very clearly kind of addressing the fact that you are going to grow old, you've got a history behind you, you've got to live with the legacy of the decisions, you've got to live with the fact that, the decision that you made 30 years ago that may not necessarily have seemed vastly important at the time has become something that's defined who you are. I think it's fair to say we've all been in situations where you make a decision in the heat of the moment and you kind of regret that for the rest of your life. You get a health condition, or you don't look after yourself, or you find that got somebody pregnant and you perhaps shouldn't have done that, those type of things. So you live with decisions that can be quite transient and fleeting. But what you can't do is you can't wipe the, you can't erase the trail behind you. You were there, and that's how you got to where you are today. And that's what a huge chunk of, I think, of Never Get Old is around. There's an element about defiance. So it's going, well, just because my age is not something that's going to define me, the fact that I'm 56 isn't something that's going to define me or hold me back. But you do have an element of a legacy around that. Is, you are judged by your actions, and the version of you that ceases to exist, or more correctly, when you exit somebody's life, that version of you is a version that only exists in them. So, for example, the people that I split up with in the year 2000, the version of me that exists in their life has nothing to do with the version of me that I am now, and vice versa. So you've got to live with the legacy of the decisions, you've got to live with the legacy of history, but there's also an inevitability around it. History leaves traces you can't remove. There's an element of how much of it is fate versus how much of it is a decision. How much of it is around change, and as you get older, you get wrinklier, and in my case, you get bolder, or your hair grows whiter, and you'll remember that the ending of every story is either death or being transported into a robot body, like Richard Nixon in Futurama. The latter of which, as far as I know, hasn't happened for anybody yet. So you've got to go, right, so if you don't get old, you either do one of two things. You either age incredibly, or you're frozen forever at a certain age in time. And part of Never Get Old as a lyric, I think, is taking a light and shining it upon the idea that, well, as the pop song says, I don't know if you've seen her lately, but Christ, she's looking rough, is that idea of going, well, actually, people aren't allowed to age, they aren't allowed to get older. The version of them that exists in somebody's mind is the version of them that ceased to exist 25, 30 years before. And the 25 or 30 years before reality, the 30 years before that, was Bowie as Ziggy Stardust at the Hammersmith Odeon on the 3rd of July 1973. So it's a pretty exciting kind of idea, is going, actually, I'm not going to be defined by your conceptions of what you think I should be. I am going to be who I am. That's where Never Get Old, I think, became a really interesting song, one that should have been played. I think if it was playing live now, for example, I think that would be a regular slot in his set list. It was also, by the way, a remix of Never Get Old called Rebel Never Gets Old, which was a mashup of Rebel and Never Gets Old, that was released on a 12-inch picture disc and CD single and downloads. Mashups were huge in 2003, 2004. We take the music from one track and the vocals from another, and you'd slot them into each other, and then you'd end up with something like block rocking beats mashed with Dio's Holy Diver, for example, which is one of the best mashups of all time. Which was done, I think, by Wax Audio, who are very, very good. And they may have been the people that did Rebel Never Gets Old. I'm not quite sure. We've got track 4 is The Loneliest Guy, which was played quite frequently on the tour, was captured on the live album that was from the tour. And Loneliest Guy, I think, is a song that to me at least, is because all these songs are kind of fixated on the idea of the notion of identity and history and legacy and belonging and who am I and what is my reality. Loneliest Guy is a song that was kind of going, well, I've got art, I've got culture, I've got books, films, records, TVs, books, magazines. Withdrawal, self-disgust is not the same as apathy, as REM said it. But it's all those things that's kind of going, well, actually, if I've only got those, if I haven't got friends, if I haven't got family, if I haven't got dogs and cats and children and all that stuff, it can get quite lonely. So it's a man the idea for The Loneliest Guy, the idea of looking to the future and going, well, what happens if the poor woman or man that I love has died? What happens if my friends have gone away? Am I kind of inhabiting a future that never came true for anybody but myself? Kind of like, for example, Milton Keynes, which was designed for a future which never arrived, but somehow Milton Keynes still exists. I don't know. Number 5, Looking for Water. As a cartoon image, that song. It's a strange and unusual song, although lots of Bowie songs are, of course, because Strange and Unusual is exactly what it did. For me, it kind of conjures up the idea of, and I might go through the lyrics here. There's a sense of, for example, whilst the lyric is quite abstract, what I'm drawing away from looking for water is it's the idea of a person who's looking for life. It's a person who's looking for the thing that sustains life, and something which isn't just, books and records and whatever. The idea of a cartoon image of a man who's kind of crawling across a desert looking for an oasis of water, but finding oil in a post 9/11 wasteland is the idea. He's found oil, but actually what he needs is he needs water. He needs something to drink, and kind of going, people are mistaking things like money and oil and all that type of stuff for something that is actually, life and nutrients, and something that keeps you alive. And you kind of go, what am I really living for? What is this all about? Track 6 is She'll Drive the Big Car. Not my favourite song at all. In fact, I barely remember its existence on a day-to-day basis. I've got very little to say about that song. Indeed, in fact, I'll just kind of look through the lyrics, and one of those songs where Bowie's kind of addressing a she. And I think songs that don't talk about self, I think songs that talk in an abstract third person about she, the female ideal, are pretty weak songwriting, actually. Kind of thinking about Dancing Barefoot, She by Suede. Sorry, not my favourite songs at all. Character sketches, but they almost feel like, from a male narrator's point of view, is that you can't necessarily understand fully what it's like to be a woman. You can't understand what it's like to have to carry the weight of other people's expectations, or what it's like to live in a universe where, because of your gender, you're objectified and you're only seen as looking like a certain thing, or you only have worth because of the shape of your cheekbones. And I think I'm going to get a little bit personal here. A friend of mine is like supermodel good looking, like really staggeringly good looking, like better than Zoolander. The problem with that, and that's not a problem for her, but it's a problem with, she walks in a room, loads of guys literally just forget how to think, and want to talk at her because they think she'd look good on their arm. And then you kind of go, well, it makes it really, really difficult to have a genuine connection with somebody if people can't look beyond that. And it's been, and this is me looking at it from the outside, but it's made it more difficult to have make genuine connections with other human beings if the people around you behave differently because of how you look. And I think that's part of one of the things which actually, as a man, you cannot really understand what that feels like, is to go into a room and know that everyone's looking at you, they're making a value judgment and an assessment about who you are on the basis of what you look like, and they've already made an assessment about whether you're worth talking to because of how good they think you'll look on their arm. It's kind of a little dark and a little dank and a little but there's not very much, I can't do much about that. But what it does mean, it makes genuine relationships really, really difficult to have, because you're going, well, how much of this is a genuine connection and how much of this is because I look a certain way and guys want to fuck me, that kind of thing. Obviously, that's not an issue I have to worry about. I have a face made for radio. I know that. That's okay with me. But that's one of the things where I find men writing songs from a female perspective is that it's really difficult sometimes to fully grasp, I think, the full entirety of perhaps what it is to be a woman. Moving on, swiftly on, let's go over to side 2 of the LP, although, of course, as I said, the LP wasn't released until 2014. And we have Days, which is very reminiscent of a song by Ray Davies of the Kinks of the same name. It's got the same title as we've seen previously on at least one edition of the album. This version, there is a Kinks cover, Waterloo Sunset, so it's not far from Bowie's mind, and I think he covered Kinks on Pin-Ups as well. And then we have Full Dog Bombs the Moon, track 8, which is very clearly inspired by the Iraq War and what happened over there. And Full Dog Bombs the Moon is not my favourite lyric, but there's a kind of like a lyric about, basically, I'm goddamn rich, an exploding man. When I talk in the night, there's all on my hands. What a dog! The dog is cruel and smart. Smart time breaks the heart. A devil in the market. And it's all kind of, it's kind of like a piss take of bits of Wall Street, bits of capitalism, bits of society that are geared around money and objectification, and about the need for, I think, the way that oil has been kind of become effectively a replacement for things like love in the whole of society. We have track 9, which is Try Some Buy Some. That's a cover version of George Harrison, ex of Beatles band, who had written it in 1970. So again, couple of cover versions there. And then we have the last two songs. One is Reality, which is, you'd think a title track for an LP would fully grasp exactly what the album is about and trying to encapsulate all of the themes and the ideas in one place. And you would have thought penultimate spot, perfect place to put that. Not quite is the case for this one. And it's a song about life being what you make of it, and the lyric is formed out as like an abstract set of single lines which together form a collage of a reality. A kind of, you think about Nirvana lyrics, for example, especially on Nevermind, is that lyrics on Nevermind, and much like the reality title track, they're individual kind of 5-6 words, certain number of syllables, flashes of images which together form a cohesive whole. It's kind of like someone turned Quiet and Catsy into a 4-minute rock song. Not quite so good though. Where it kind of implies that the reality that we live in is the product of the influences that we have around us, the experiences that we have, and the history that brings us up to this point. And then on the standard edition of the album, the last track is Bring Me the Head of the Disco King, which, as I previously said, Bring Me the Head of the Disco King was first recorded in 1992 for the Black Tie White Noise album. That version just didn't seem ready to come out. And it was remixed, parts of it were re-recorded. The drums for Bring Me the Head of the Disco King Bring Me the Disco King, I don't know what I'm quoting, Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, the Sam Peckinpah film with Warren Beatty from, I think, 1974. But Bring Me the Disco King as a song is a bit of an assemblage of other parts. So the drums were recorded by Matt Chamberlain, but they were recorded for an entirely different song in 2001 and then adapted and placed onto Bring Me the Disco King. And it was first heard on the soundtrack to, of all things, a vampire movie called Underworld, in a remix by Danny Lohner of Nine Inch Nails. And it's okay, but if that had been the last song on the last David Bowie LP ever, you kind of wondered, is that it? That didn't feel final. It didn't feel the way to bring the Bowie story to a close, which is good because it wasn't, but there was more to come. So on the 2 CD version of the album, here it is. Hello, on the 2 CD version, there's 3 extra songs. There's one called Fly, which is it doesn't fit the LP. It doesn't fit the mood of the LP. It doesn't fit the sound of the LP. But it's pretty good. However, it is the last collaboration between David and Carlos Alomar, and it revisits some of the themes which were in the Buddha of Suburbia. Then we have track 2, which is the Queen of All Tarts, which is an overture. Queen of All Tarts was used as an instrumental introduction to Bowie and his band on the 2003 and 2004 tour, so therefore it also appears on the reality tour releases. And then we have a re-recording of Rebel Rebel, which is perfectly adequate, nothing amazing at all. And that is David Bowie's Reality there, in the 2 CD edition. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper into the extra tracks and the extra releases. So the first thing that we had was the Reality CD and DVD. Now apparently there's a 5.1 mix on a DVD or a Super Audio CD of it, which was sold in certain towns. I don't quite know when that was. We had a two disc version which features David Bowie live at Hammersmith Riverside Studios on the 8th of September 2003 on this DVD, which was simulcast, terrible words, and broadcast to cinemas a week before the album came out, the full show, as well as being broadcast on television a couple of times. So you can get the whole of the Reality show. He had played every song from the Reality album live. Hammersmith then walked off stage, then came back on and did an encore of about 45 minutes of extra tracks. And on top of that, there was also a Waterloo Sunset cover version of the Kinks, which was the bonus track on the CD of this, which comes in a silver box there. So it's a tour edition, includes a bonus DVD of the live performance of Reality plus bonus track Waterloo Sunset that wasn't on a single. So there you go. We did have, as I've said before, one whole DVD single, Nuclear Star, and this is a DVD single, a dreadful format. Thank God it didn't take to the market. And this features the video of Nuclear Star, an EPK for the Reality album, and a bonus exclusive studio recording, a cover version of ZZ Sputnik's Love Missile F111. It is not amazing. This might have been released as a CD single in Canada or Australia. I'm not sure. I don't particularly care. And then Bowie went on tour. So through 2003 to 2004, we have a couple of live releases here. But we do also have, and this is a bizarre release. It really is a remix album called Club Bowie that was released in December-ish 2003. It's dog shit. Don't bother buying it. It's awful. Scumfrog remixes of Loving the Alien and This Is Not America. A Trifactor remix of Let's Dance. David Guetta's version of Heroes. Oh, I bought the 12-inch. I wish I hadn't done that. It's awful. And then remixes of China Girl. Magic Dance. What the hell are you thinking? And a Club Bolly mix of Let's Dance. It is not very good. It's probably about 65p on Amazon. That's more money than it's worth. The remix of Heroes, Just for One Day, by David Guetta and Bowie, was released in 2003. This is not good. It really isn't. There's a risk with a remix album, is that it ends up sounding like generic sing-alonga, thump-alonga, dunka, 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 put a donk on it, dance music, and nothing dates faster than something that feels absolutely of the moment, because even one moment later, it suddenly becomes old-fashioned, overweight, and out of date. I bought this, and then I listened to it, and I was like, oh, mate, really? You didn't have to, did you? Well, he did, and there we are. So let's pretend that doesn't exist. Moving swiftly on, I think he got his money for that. And what we did have then, 2003 to 2004, was Bowie's last world tour, the Reality Tour, released as a DVD in October 2004, and then later as a CD and LP in January 2010. I didn't buy the vinyl of Reality Tour when it came out because I'd just become a dad. I had other shit on my mind. And so the Reality Tour was represented for 6 years by the Reality Tour DVD, which was filmed in Dublin over 2 nights and captures the tour as well as anything else could have done. The tour was 9 months, 22 countries, 59 songs, 112 live shows. Effectively, Bowie had told his band he was going to take a step back from touring and become a very boring house dad because he hadn't been necessarily present during the earlier years of his son Duncan, and that was something that he wanted to get right the second time round. So he'd always intended to bring down touring at the end of the 2004 run, but something happened along the way. This was his tour as him effectively saying goodbye to the world as himself, with the idea that when or if he did come back, it would be a very different environment that he would be in. Can you hear that? That's a car alarm. I hope whoever it has it switches it off because I can't go out there and make them do it. And it's gone. This was one of the biggest tours of 2003. It grossed $46 million. He played Hong Kong for the first time since 1983, Japan for the first time since 1996, Australia and New Zealand for the first time since 1987. And surprisingly, you would think, oh, he'd be in stadiums. No. Biggest venues he played were like 10, 12,000 in terms of headlines on his own. And depending upon which town and how much demand there was, it went between about 2,000 capacity venues to 10,000 capacity venues. As I said, this was effectively his 7th LP that had been released in 10 years. This was his 5th world tour in 10 years. The world has seen a lot of David Bowie over the previous 10 years. There was an element of Bowie fatigue in 2003 and 2004. And so the tour was perhaps, his last shows in London were at the Wembley Arena, for example, not Wembley Stadium or Hyde Park or anything like that. Wembley Arena, and played 2 shows there. But the live performance at Dublin was captured and released as a DVD. Now the strange thing about this, and I think it's fair to say strange might not be the word, is that, by the way, this DVD was produced and mixed by Tony Visconti, so sounds absolutely immaculate. It's a very faithful capturing of the tour. The CD released in 2010 features 2 or 3 extra tracks, being Fall Dog Bombs the Moon, Breaking Glass and China Girl, and the iTunes version has 2 extra songs on top of that. Quite well you didn't put the whole show on 2 CDs. I don't know, maybe there wasn't quite enough space. But what we did find is that this was going to be Bowie's last world tour. I had tickets to see him at the Tea in the Park Festival in Scotland, Kinross, in July 2004, and he never made it. Bowie had a heart attack on stage in Prague. You can hear an audio recording of the show on YouTube. It's not fun. And then he played one more show at the Hurricane Festival, and then cancelled the rest of his remaining shows. So I was 2 weeks away from seeing Bowie. I did see him in 2000, obviously, at Glastonbury. But at that point, I was tired and old, and all I wanted to do was sit down. And then I was 2 weeks away from seeing him at Tea in the Park. And instead, they bumped everybody up 1 slot on the headline. So instead of seeing David Bowie, and by the way, his first encore track, would have been probably something like Bring Me the Disco King. Instead of having Bowie sing Bring Me the Disco King, I had the bassist from The Darkness doing a flute solo. It's fair to say that was fucking awful compared to seeing Bowie. And I was just like, really, of all the bands to take Bowie's place, The fucking Darkness. I know you guys only had 2 weeks to sort it out, but it was a shoddy state of affairs. And everybody who was there was kind of going, really wish I was seeing somebody else, which is my overriding feeling when I saw The Darkness, who, by the way, I'd seen like at Nebworth a year previously, at Brixton supporting Change Addiction. 6 months previous to that, I'd seen The Darkness a lot. They were not Tea in the Park headliners. You know, it's kind of like if you replace the Rolling Stones with Example, it's just not the same league at all. And so I was annoyed about that, as you can easily tell. Reality was the last album that Bowie released before he, as I said, moved from broadcast to transmit, before he kind of retreated into himself and took a long look back at his life and decided what he was going to do next was going to come from a place not of habit, not of routine, but because it was an artistic statement. There was something that he absolutely, definitely, desperately wanted to make, as opposed to anything else, which was a long 10 years between this and the next day, where Bowie asked us, where are we now? We had, in reality, I think we had a very good Bowie LP, but a completely normal Bowie LP, in so much as, if you didn't like this one, there was going to be another one in 18 months to 2 years. And what nobody expected was for Bowie to just kind of retreat away from playing live and from being a public figure, and then engaging with the world only and solely on his terms and his terms alone. It felt that it would be, I think, hesitant to say he wasn't appreciated in his lifetime. He definitely was. But there was a time around 2010, 2012, where Bowie's public perception was as a has-been, and that no one necessarily felt that they were absolutely desperate to find out what he was up to. He was living quietly somewhere in New York, taking the kids to school, having a good life, and making rare public appearances, largely either when Imam was doing something, or perhaps at the premiere of his son's film Moon. David Bowie didn't exist as a public figure between 2004 and 2013. There were little slivers of who he used to be, and I'll talk about the Wilderness years later. But this, for a long period of time, this was it. This was the end of life on planet Bowie. And what a strange way it would have been to have made an exit. There were a couple of little one-off appearances which happened on records. He did a duet of a re-recording of Changes with someone called Butterfly Butcher for the Shrek 2 soundtrack album. Wish I hadn't bought that. He did vocals on a track called Isn't It Evening with Earl Slick. I think he did vocals on songs with TV on the Radio, Lou Reed, Arcade Fire, people like that. But he was not public. David was a ghost for a period of time before he dies. He existed in people's consciousnesses, and really, as anyone should do, is, what I've always wanted from artists is for them to make the records that they want to make when they want to make it, to a way that feels true and honest to them. And he didn't feel like saying anything, and sometimes you learn a lot more by listening than you do by talking, and he was listening to the world and the way the wind was blowing. I'll talk about the Wilderness years. I'll talk about 2005 to 2012, and probably that's about the time I might do a conversation about my favourite Bowie films, because he's acted in a lot of stuff. And he'd pop up, do a couple of days here, a couple of days there, fade into the background like Homer going into the hedge, and that's all you'd see of him for years on end. It was a strange way to bring it to an end, but as we know, it wasn't the end, because there's always more to come. And that is the next episode, where I talk about the next day. I'll quickly wrap up. 2005 or thereabouts, we did get a double CD version of Reality that, as I've said before, was in what I affectionately call a silver box. And this features a second CD with the B-sides from the Reality period, being the Waterloo Sunset, Fly, Queen of All Tarts, the re-recording of Rebel Rebel, Love Missile, F111, and then 4 remixes of the Rebel Never Gets Old mashup on there. For the time being, this is the only expanded version of Reality that you can get on the now deleted silver box. You can pick it up affordably, get it. If not, I'm sure it'll be in the next Great Big Whacking box set, whenever that comes out. Who knows when, who knows where. In the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay beautiful. If you've enjoyed this, please subscribe. If you haven't, subscribe anyway. Just don't watch the videos. And then that should make things easier for me anyway, and please my ego when I've got enough more subscribers. I can't even believe I'm doing the like and subscribe thing. Do it if you want. Don't do it if you don't want to. It's up to you. You're a grown adult. If you're not a grown adult and you're watching all the way through to the end of this, well, that's unexpected, but I didn't swear much, so don't tell your mum and dad. And so that's where I'm going to leave it. So thank you, and I will see you all again soon. Bye. 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 Bye.